Oh shit. I'm fucked. If you don't want to get into this situation, I strongly encourage you to watch this video from start to the end and don't skip any parts just to avoid reaching out into such situation which I encountered here. I promise that this is not going to happen in this video and it will have everything in right order. With that said, we can begin assembling suspension and the swing arm of Scott Spark RC Pro. But before that happens, let's get back to the paint work. In the last video I mentioned that I'm going to do some painting to the scratched areas, and with this marker I just covered some of them, and at least they won't be as visible as it was previously. We'll begin from removing the bushings. Initially I thought that maybe they can be left as they are, but as long as I try to eliminate those from the frame, I realized that no, it's a good idea to change them. So here I'm using 9 size socket just to push it through from the other side, because the edge of that yellow bushing inside the frame was very small and it was very difficult to push it from the inside. So for that reason I used the socket and it went out quite well. As mentioned, I thought that maybe they are not needed to be changed, but trust me, the difference between how tight the old one and how tight the new ones were is significantly huge, because it had some mud and all that stuff probably wear it out a bit. So because it was included in the whole kit, I just did that replacement, and that's kind of it. Remember the preload ring, so it's important to add a grease onto the thread before applying it to make sure that the easiness of rotating it is good enough. Important thing, do not tighten it to the full extent just yet, because it will control the distance from the frame later down the road. Inner linkage position should be looking downwards, not upwards, so it's just an arch towards the down. We're applying grease inside the inner linkage, and just to make it stick I'm using a hex for the time being. Now I'm trying to do that with the linkage. Then adding those pivots, you have to also apply the washer, but I'll explain this a bit later. And you can see that once you added the drive side pivot, you should do some knocking with the rubber mallet in order to fit it in towards the left side, but I just use hands. I removed this out just to make sure which bolt should be used, because there were no dot on the side. It means it should be used with 10 Newton meters markup on the bolt, and it's actually the same which was previously in the bike, but I just wanted to make sure. And do you happen to know how and when 15mm one is used? Maybe it's on lighter frames, I'm not sure about that, but yeah. And here is the thing about the washers. Basically there are two options how they can be applied: with the black facing the bearing, or with the colored one, so metallic. The bike originally came with metallic coming outwards, so black was towards the bearing, and the same was in documentation as well. But at the same time we found one video which included that washer at a different opposite side. So for that reason I'm not adding those in front of the camera, so you could find out and make decision of yours. But basically what we figure out is that most locations and the fitting on the bike came with black towards the bearing. If you want to, you can experiment with that. My take on the topic is that black should be facing towards the bearings, because it was that way originally. Remember a preload washer? Now it is the time when the bolt is tightened. You should rotate it towards the bottom. If you are facing the bike as I am here, the ring should be rotated in that direction, so towards me at the bottom. And you are doing that until the point when there is no movement in the linkage. So you will get an idea how it works. It just offsets the distance and makes sure that the linkage presses into the inside. And once you make that rotation, then you just have to tighten the bolt which comes from the outside of the pivot. What this bolt does is that it keeps in place the preload washer so it doesn't move back again, and it just sticks. Here I'm just making sure that it's not moving and everything is fine with that. We'll continue by linking the chainstay linkage. I just realized that these are no longer needed for me. And yeah, I'm not very much environmental friendly with this one, but that's how it happened when I wasn't prepared anything else. Make sure to spend your time in order to fit that rubber cover on the cables, because it just fits inside. Apply some grease to the bearing, just make sure that the washers fit and they don't move away, and also add the washer metallic one on the drive side. Those washers are also in the same colorway as the main linkage one, and I am applying them black towards the bearing. Once everything in place, I'm just adding the axle and we'll continue from there. If you're interested in maintenance of a bike and you have ScottSpark, do not hesitate to subscribe to the channel, and chances are very high that we'll meet again in the future. From the left side you have to add this nut. Whenever you are adding something into frame, you should always grease the circumference of that nut, and when it comes to bolts, you should apply the grease to the inside of the bolt which is not threaded, so that way you will probably maintain the smoothness of your suspension. That lock nut is applied from the drive side and it's rotated with 10mm hex. In order to tighten it up, you need to rotate it counterclockwise and do the tightening from the drive side mostly. You should use thread lock on the bolt which will come from the left side. Here I just applied some additional pressure to the bolt from the left side just to make sure that it's tightened up to the spec of 15 Newton meters. Once that bolt is in, we can insert the shock, and yeah, in intro you could have seen one of my failures where I firstly connected all the swing arm pieces and realized afterwards that it will be a lot more complicated to install the shock, so for that reason I made sure to unscrew that top swing arm bolts and repeat the same process again. Yeah, it was a bit of a bummer, but I just for some reason haven't thought about it properly as I did that process. The top shock bolt is a bit difficult to tighten it up while the pivots of swing arm are not connected, so I decided to do it afterwards to full extent how it's needed. Bolts at the bottom of a shock as well have to be greased a bit at the part where it goes into the bushing. This is the thing I haven't knew, and I found that in the tech book. Whenever something is being connected from the two sides, I always tighten them up equally from one or from wherever, just to make sure that not too much pressure is being applied from one side while other is not connected. The washers of the top side has no confusion, just applied red to the outside and blue to the inside of the pivot connection. It is also suggested that you should apply thread lock to the inside of a swing arm, which I haven't done here. Most likely I will do that in the future because I'm going to apply some protective tape. One way or another, the top swing arm will be disconnected once again. So yeah, that's just for visualizing purposes. And the only part left was this one with a dot. So I'm not sure where it would go, but if you know, let me know in the comments. That was it, full assembly of ScottSpark RC Pro 2022 model. If you're interested about previous steps, I will drop link into the comments. If such content is interesting to you, feel free to subscribe to the channel, and chances are very high that we will meet here again in the future. Thanks a lot for your time, and I hope to see you around.